Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mark Lewis, the Executive Director of the Emerging Technologies Institute at the National Defense Industrial Association. And first, I want to thank you all for your support of what we're doing at NDI, NDIA, and ETI. And especially thank you for joining us for today's webinar, which is Biotechnology 101 with Dr. Justin Sanchez. This webinar is part of our new Tech Thursday series, where we're trying to distill complex technologies into introductory webinars on science and defense implications. Let me offer just a few brief introductory remarks before we get started. First, all the attendee lines are going to be muted. If you have a question during the webinar, please submit your question in the question box on the webinar panel that you'll see on the right side of your screen. We'll do our best to get through all the questions during the question and answer period, although, of course, no guarantees. I also want to note we are recording today's webinar for our NDIA, Women in Defense, and NTSA members who are unable to attend. It will be available on our website. And frankly, it'll be available any member who wishes to review the material at a later date. Within the next few days, we'll post the recording, the slides, and also answers to the Q&A portion of today's webinar. That'll be on NDIA Connect. Please remember, as always, the goal here is to educate our members and introduce new topics. We're not selling any program, policy, or company product. So without further ado, allow me to introduce our very distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Justin Sanchez. So Dr. Sanchez is a Battelle Technical Fellow. He's a noted expert in biotechnology, and in that role, he creates strategic vision to guide Battelle's life sciences and the biotechnology business. He serves on the Battelle leadership team and leads the organization's technical investment strategies, initiates and drives collaboration across Battelle, as well as working with government, industry, and academic partners. Prior to joining Battelle, Dr. Sanchez was the director of the famed Biological Technology Office, BTO, at DARPA, which is responsible for many, many impressive breakthroughs. He advanced the mission of BTO through strategy development focused on vital breakthrough technologies and capabilities for national security, particularly in the areas of neurotechnology, gene editing, synthetic biology, and infectious disease. Some of the major accomplishments that Dr. Sanchez is responsible for include developing foundational human neurotechnology for the United States Brain Initiative, delivering the world's most advanced prosthetic arm to military veterans, accelerating gene editing techniques for national security and human health, and forming partnerships to deliver countermeasures in the African Ebola crisis. He oversaw 31 new DARPA programs and invested more than $1.6 billion in national labs, industry, and academic institutions. Prior to DARPA, Dr. Sanchez had a very distinguished career in academia. I think spent 11 years as a faculty member working in this area. Great background for the work that he subsequently did at DARPA and now at Battelle. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Justin Sanchez. Justin, thank you so much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mark, and thanks so much to you and NDIA for the invitation to be here. The ETI, Emerging Technologies Institute, just awesome mission, and the topics that you guys have been covering lately are just really tremendous, and it's a real pleasure to meet with the community here today and share a few thoughts on biotechnology. The audience you'll see, it's Biotechnology 101, and as Mark said, there's an educational component to all of this. So I hope to share with you a few ideas of how to think about biotech in the context of national security, discuss some progress and opportunities, and give a framework for how we should think about this new and emerging and really thrilling part of science and technology. So with that, let's just jump straight in. I'm always inspired by biology because it has these wonderful properties that you don't see anywhere else. It's resilience and adaptable and reconfigurable. And I share with you this image here, and this one we all know, right? You learned this as a kid of how organisms can transform. It's remarkable what these organisms can do and what nature has come to become over many, many, many years. But while I'm inspired by kind of the beauty and the intricacy and the unique properties of nature, I'm always thinking about, well, how can these properties be adapted and how can they be thought of in the context of real engineering or national security kinds of problems? And how can we apply these principles and how can we apply the wonderful aspects of biology to some of the problems that our country is facing? And there's a huge opportunity around that because we're just learning about all of the new aspects of these elements of biology, and we're developing the techniques in order to really tap into them and use them for a wide variety of purposes. Now, this message of biology is wonderful and it can do all these kind of extraordinary things. Lots of people say that. But one of my main messages for everybody on the line today and those that will be watching later is that we need to tie those wonderful aspects of biology to very, very specific performance characteristics that are useful to the people that would be using biotechnology. And in this venue, it's all about national security, but we can all agree that biotechnology has a lot of roles even beyond national security and health and other related fields. So, so again, first and foremost, biology is wonderful, but unless we tie it to those performance characteristics, it becomes very hard to kind of use it and appreciate it in a very practical and applied way. I think we are at a crux in our timeline of the development of biotechnology in which we are getting to this realm of applied science and technology for national security. So to share with you just a couple of thoughts on that are, what are the elements that the DoD really cares about? Well, looking at this slide, extending the life of material. We have lots of systems that are out there that we want those systems to work in very specific and well-defined ways for a long period of time, and are the most extreme kinds of scenarios. So think about new anti-corrosion, anti-fouling, new kind of materials that might adapt to the environments that are around them to kind of deliver new properties and applications that are not accessible through traditional chemistry and materials and things like that. Second major area is kind of captured by the second two columns here, protect humans. So military personnel get exposed to all kinds of very difficult situations. They go to very complex missions that they have to deliver upon. So how do those individuals that put themselves in harm's way, how do we protect them? So think about new smart textiles that might, again, adapt to the threats that might be in the environment, or even biologically doped membranes that could respond in ways that provide some kind of protection. The flip side of that is performance. And military personnel, again, as those missions become even more and more complex over time, we're always looking for ways to help them to do that job even better. So, a few technologies that are out there are modulation of the microbiome, how that plays into things like the gut-brain axis, and how that might lead to cognitive performance that might not be accessible any other way. New and emerging technologies that are quite possible, still a lot to understand, but directly applicable to immediate missions that military personnel are faced with today. A few other ideas, sensing threats. So we all know that having intelligence can create an advantage in a lot of adversarial kinds of solutions. Many people that are out in the DoD kind of world often think about, again, truly traditionally engineered systems that have fixed batteries and things like that. Well, wonderful aspect of nature is if you build a biological sensor or a bio-based kinds of sensor, it might not need a battery. It might have new kinds of properties that it can sense and detect in a way that our adversaries might not even be able to detect or know is even there. So a lot of interesting aspects in that realm that biotechnology might be able to play. The last two columns on this slide are all about production of very key materials. The first one about increasing production is all about, well, we might have traditional chemistries for materials that are strategically important, but it's really hard to make that, or it might be really, really slow. Biotechnology can play a role in that with synthetic biology and ways of optimizing new alternative approaches of producing those materials. And then the last column, specialized production at scale, there could even be new materials that the world has never seen before that could be produced through biotechnology kinds of constructs and then scaled for a wide variety of applications. So again, main message on this slide is, while a lot of people talk about biotechnology being this kind of wonderful thing that's way off on the horizon, from my perspective, it is a technology of today. There are some very concrete performance characteristics and key performance indicators that can be applied to biotechnology today. And if those elements are integrated directly into the DoD kind of construct and how the DoD does business, we're going to have an entirely new pathway in order to bring these technologies to bear for the kinds of missions, not only of today, but well into the future. So I see a great kind of additional capability on top of the status quo of traditional chemistry, physics, and electrical engineering of biotechnology, and being able to develop agile biosystems that can focus on a wide variety of capabilities moving forward into the future. Okay, so to build upon this a little bit more, again, I won't belabor this too much, but I really wanted to share with the teams that yes, there are those performance indicators and performance metrics in the specific applications, but any time that you can tie biotechnology to a military system or application that the DoD is dealing with today, I think there's more opportunities for us as a community to have those technologies play an even deeper role. Again, just to show a handful of these on the screen, again, there's countless others, but how do we turn waste into valuable materials for those operational missions and far forward kinds of situations? How do we think about building runways or places that we might have to operate in ways that don't require traditional trucks of cement and things like that? Or even at the far end of the spectrum, how do we think about the space domain, new and emerging area that the DoD is expanding into, and how biotechnology might play a role there? I mean, doing biomanufacturing in space in these kind of even more austere environments than even on terrestrial kinds of locations provides new kind of emerging opportunities for biotechnology in which we can prove out those performance characteristics and what ultimate capabilities that they deliver to the DoD. Okay, so let's go a step further. Again, this kind of last slide to set all of this up for you. The other aspect that I think that the biotechnology could benefit from is helping the traditional DoD infrastructure and the teams inside of the Pentagon think about where biotechnology really fits. And this chart breaks it down to me and towards the most fundamental aspects that one would need to know about how to position or both develop and productize biotechnology for the applications that are important for the DoD. So let me first define the axes in this. So on the y-axis, you have kind of two extremes: disruptive technologies that completely blow up the status quo, and then you've got iterative technology. So again, this might be an incremental kind of change from what the status quo might be today. And then on the x-axis, again at the top of the screen here, you've got research and development and test and evaluation, kind of early to mid kind of elements of biotechnology development. And then the other column is productization, full deployment of whatever biotechnology might be there. Okay, so again, I encourage all of you as you're talking within DoD circles or you're talking to customers about these kinds of technologies, knowing where you land or technology lands is really, really important to help those that might be implementing biotechnologies to have an understanding of where are we today, how do we actually get it into the service and field, and how do we move forward with it. So let me give you just a couple of examples, and I really want to run through the extremes. Let's go to bottom right-hand corner. Okay, so iterative and productization. These are technologies to me the most near term. Things like bioremediation and using microbes to do that, or mold and corrosion prevention. There are biotechnologies today that can be applied into that. There are customers inside the DoD that need that today. This is a place where there's a very clear demand that those technologies, to me, have the best chance of moving out in the very near future and can provide a very viable and even higher performing alternative to what might be out there today. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum, disruptive and the research and development side of this. So these are technologies that would create surprise. Again, a lot of the work that I did and the team that I worked with at DARPA did when I was at BTO, all about surprise. Technologies that our adversaries would never in the world ever see coming. So these could be things like, let's produce components for microelectronics using biotechnology, or let's develop new chassis of microbes to produce either materials or functions that, again, aren't capable to be produced via any other kind of process engineering or chemistry. Okay, so those are the two bookends of the kind of near-term and long-term spectrum. Let's go to the other diagonals now. So let's start on the upper right. So disruptive and productization. These are kind of bold technology alternatives to incumbent solutions. So let's talk about microgravity in space again. So trash gets produced in space. What do? Probably pack it up, bring it back to Earth. Maybe there's an alternative to that where you use biotechnology to break that out, those materials down and turn them into something else. Or what about metals that might be important to us, metals that might be in electronics? It's really hard to harvest those. We could use biotechnology to harvest them in different ways to provide an alternative to a very difficult kind of a process. Okay, so that's the upper right-hand corner. Let's go to the bottom left. So this is iterative and research and development or test and evaluation. These are about technologies that really require and facilitate partnerships. So new fermentation processes, new systems biology, about informatics. You know, these are some of the foundational elements of biotechnology that if organizations inside of the community of people working on biotechnology came together, pooled their resources and delivered them back to the DoD, would provide a really transformative kind of way that we think about biotechnology and how we would navigate that space of bringing a technology ultimately to market. Okay, so I hope this helps the audience here think about biotechnology, and I see a lot of opportunities in this space given the different roles of biotechnology in each one of them. Okay, so those are foundational concepts. Again, great in order to help to organize our thoughts a little bit. What I'd like to do next is let's do some deep dives. Again, having spent time in the DoD and having talked to a lot of leaders in the DoD, I think almost all of them appreciate biotechnology. But at the end of the day, when you talk to a military leader and the kinds of problems that they're trying to solve, they want real, concrete technologies that apply to their mission sets. And it could either be today or in the future, but need to have specific performance capabilities that make a difference in those kinds of mission sets. So I'm going to share with you a handful of these as a starting point for this kind of a discussion moving forward into the future. Okay, the first one, again, I'm sure you guys have seen some form of this video or you've heard some of this. To me, this is like the poster child of biotechnology inside of the DoD today. And I actually got this video from Blake Beckstein. He was one of the program managers in BTO when I was there. Awesome guy, awesome scientist. He's still at BTO, and he shared this video recently. This is part of the ELM program, and it's part of a construct of using biotechnology to produce growable runways. We know in austere environments, it's really tough to create a runway or do one on the fly, especially if the resources are constrained and time is short. And him and the team that were supported on the ELM program were able to produce a growable runway. So I'd like to show here, there's an osprey, it's landing, there's an untreated ground, getting kind of raw ground. And what happens when an osprey tries to land there, and then one that's treated with a biotechnology that turned it into a runway. So let me see if I can play this video for you. So you can see in that video, it's really remarkable, right? The untreated, the kind of the blackout from the dust makes it really, really hard to operate in that kind of scenario. And then with the treated ground, you can see that osprey was able to land in a very different way and creating an opportunity for situational awareness, maybe that some of those operators didn't have without that. So again, immediate technology can be applied today and produces an operational capability that's unlike anything else that's out there. Again, really remarkable and pretty understandable why it's the poster child for a lot of biotechnology these days. The second example that I'd like to share with you, this is some work that we're doing at Battelle as part of the DARPA research program, and it's all about turning waste into products. So again, back to far forward kinds of environments, there's a lot of waste that's produced there. More often than not, that waste is thrown into burn pits. Not really great, not only for the people that are there, but also it's a resource that is just being wasted. So the concept for this effort is, can you turn plastic, think of plastic bottles, develop a technology to convert those plastic bottles into something that's useful. And what the team that's working on this has been able to do is take a plastic bottle, break it down. So there's a new process that has been developed to kind of shred up that material and produce it into a form that is very well tuned to be broken down by a biological microbe that can turn that plastic material into a valuable DoD product. This is a lubricant. Think of a lubricant for a weapon. And if you talk to any of the operators that are out there, many of them will tell you that when they're in far forward environments, that's one of the most important things to keep their weapon working well is having a lubricant. They don't want to carry a lot of materials in order to do that. And if you had a box that could take garbage and turn it into a lubricant in a far forward environment, it would be transformative. And this is an example of a technology that the team at Battelle has been able to do. Again, they can break down plastic bottles, they can put it into these bioreactors with these engineered strains of microbes that can turn that plastic into lubricant, and they can get 90% breakdown. And there's an example of some of that lubricant in a vial that they are able to produce. And even a couple of years of work on this program. This team is putting together a hardened, fully integrated system that can do this. It really is remarkable. Great proof of concept of how a breakthrough biotechnology are based upon these engineered strains of microbes that can transform waste into valuable, high impact kinds of materials. The next example I'd like to share with you is all about humans. Okay, so one was about military systems. The second example was about turning waste into valuable materials. Third one here is all about the humans. And to share with you a few ideas, again, this is part of another DARPA program in some work that a Battelle team is doing. It's part of the ECHO program. The whole idea was humans are exposed to a lot of different things. And for military personnel, it could be exposed to chemicals or toxins, and that could produce a negative health effect. But the other end of the spectrum is DoD's always trying to figure out who our adversaries are. We might have adversaries that are hiding in plain sight that are working with chemicals or toxins or any number of kinds of things. And we would never know. Let's say those people get rolled up. We don't know if they're an adversary or not. And we might need a biomarker in order to kind of figure that out. It turns out that there's a part of the human body and the genetic part of the human body in which there are epigenetic signatures. So these are signatures that kind of sit upon the genome. And a few examples of those are histone modifications, or how the genetic material kind of wraps around these structures, or it could be even methylation, so these methyl groups and how they interact with the genetic kind of constructs. Our team has done some work in terms of investigating whether humans that have been exposed to a wide variety of materials and compounds, if signatures could be detected from their epigenetics to tell whether they have been exposed to those. So just to get to the bottom line, we have technology that with 90 to 100% positive predictive value can tell the difference between HIV, MRSA, anthrax, organophosphates, or opioids, just to name a few. It gives you a feel for the spectrum. And then using all of these kinds of signatures here, okay? So it could be RNA, could be methylation, could be kind of histone modifications. When you put all of those epigenetic marks together into an assay, apply some machine learning in order to do some discriminant analysis, you can pull out with that high positive predictive value of what that person or people have been exposed to. Again, new and early breakthrough kind of a technology, but think about that in the context of military missions. Military personnel are exposed to things that they might not be able to see. They could be measured for those exposures. Maybe those treatments or interventions could be delivered earlier or more frequently in order to protect the warfighter as they go into those missions. And the other end of the spectrum, again, if we, in an adversarial situation, roll up somebody, we don't know if they are a threat to our national security. Epigenetic signatures could tell, let's say if they were working with some kind of materials that were a threat to the United States. So again, remarkable technology, nothing else out there quite like that in terms of being able to understand that information. Next example is not in the cell and molecular space. This is going to be more in the kind of the macro space and the neurotechnology space. And I'd like to share with you today that neurotechnology, and for those of you who do not know what neurotechnology is, think of direct interfaces to the brain or body that allow a military personnel to have bidirectional communication directly through those systems. And while there's been a whole lot of work that's been done out there in neurotechnology that's invasive in nature, so brain surgery for people that are living with medical kinds of conditions, again, that doesn't necessarily help military personnel today on operational missions unless they've been injured. There's a whole other class of neurotechnologies, wearable, non-invasive neurotechnologies that can be used for military missions today. And this is an example of a Battelle technology that it's a wearable sleeve that can has a multitude of electrodes on that can both read and write in real time to the nerves and muscles. In this example, in the arm, but you can imagine this system can be placed virtually on any part of the body and can get access to nerve and muscle activity in real time, again, bidirectionally. Why is that important? Everybody talks about human-machine symbiosis, or a person working in tandem with a autonomous or semi-autonomous vehicle. So if you look at the bottom right-hand side of this chart, military personnel in an operational mission can have their eye on a target while also communicating with a semi-autonomous vehicle, sending bidirectional commands. Could be receiving sensor information back into their body to help them to know if there's a threat there, or even could be doing command and control. Really remarkable how a technology can transform the operational conditions, as opposed to traditional things like joysticks and stuff like that that require a person to look down or use a screen and things like that. Beyond the kind of direct, human-machine symbiosis or command and control, there's a whole slew of other things that could be done here. Tactical commands, so think of silent communication between individuals, sending signals directly between nerves and muscles among individuals. Again, sounds like science fiction, but it's a technology today. We've got a lot of demos on how that actually works, and it's pretty cool. And then even things like navigation. What if a forward operating base is sending navigational kinds of information directly into your sleeve, enabling you to have some information on where to go, especially in low visibility, very complex kinds of situations. And then the upper right-hand corner, again, this is the kind of the status quo here, combat monitoring for health and medical kinds of applications. This technology also plays in that space too. So again, neurotechnology, contrary to popular belief, it's not a technology of the far off future, it's a technology of today, and it can enable hyper-enabled human-machine teaming, accelerate performance, and aid in recovery. This is a technology that will transform human performance, not only today, but far into the future. Last example here. There's a lot of talk today about rare earth elements. And for those of you who have done any homework about rare earth elements, the sources of a lot of those materials reside in adversarial countries. And if the new systems or even current systems that are going to be developed, again, in traditional material, if they rely upon these rare earth elements and we don't have access to them, we're going to be at a severe disadvantage. So there's some new and emerging technology that's, again, very early stages that can be used, that can use biotechnology, engineered microbes essentially, in order to harvest rare earth elements from different kinds of feedstocks. So the technology works like this. So think of a bioreactor, which you feed it with a feedstock that could even have a mixture of rare earth elements from alternative sources than the ones that are traditionally mined. And with those engineered microbes, it could separate out the rare earth elements. And through a second module and through some kind of lateral flow, using some binding proteins, those rare earth elements could be separated. And then once separated, could go through a third module to put them into a stable form. So again, back to your chemistry days, a lot of these elements are not stable in some form, so you have to actually stabilize them. And then once you're building this kind of end-to-end system, you would always want to do some high throughput screening. So those of you who have ever worked in biochemistry or microbial kinds of processes know that verification and validation is really important. There's a number of ways that these things can go sideways. So having high throughput screening and understanding of how efficiently the system is working is absolutely critical to making all of this work. Again, this is a new and emerging technology, but even the foundational work has been proven out even as early as today. And I see this as a really interesting alternative approach for sourcing these kinds of materials, thinking about supply chain and giving the United States a position to outpace our adversaries, even if they control the supply of a lot of those rare earth elements. So again, example of a biotechnology that has a direct application for national security implications of today. Okay, so again, quick recap on all of this. Lots of applications that have been drawn directly to human performance, materials, supply chains, operational missions for systems in far forward kind of environments. Again, remember the landing of that Osprey, or even the sourcing of valuable materials in operational missions. Biotechnology today has capabilities that have an impact in all of those areas. They're very real, they directly apply, and I really think it's up to this community to continue to have this kind of a discussion with military leaders to show that and to tie those capabilities back into the needs of those missions. So I would like to pivot here beyond the technology. So we've been talking about frameworks for biotechnology, the actual technology itself and how it actually works. But for those of us that are in the industry, market analysis is really, really important for figuring out again, how those scientific advances are going to make their way into the actual market. So let's start with a few concepts, okay? And what have we learned about the DoD government market from industry or even academic kinds of perspectives? So first of all, the acquisition of SynBio. Again, when I say acquisition, I mean who's paying for it? It's absolutely based in government funding. They're putting some part of it, but a lion's share is also coming from VC investment. And for those of you again that know a little bit about the biotechnology industry, a lot of it comes from startups, right? These are people that were in academia, have an awesome idea, they get a boatload of VC investment, they do a small company, and they figure out how to prove that technology out and show that it actually works, okay? The issue though, from a market perspective, the vast majority of the material that is in play right now in the DoD, it does still come from existing chemistry and engineering. There's a tendency to rely upon that very, very heavily for a very intuitive reason. It works, and we know how to do it well, right? So as biotechnology matures, it's absolutely essential for the industry and the associations and the people in this space figure out a way to create synergistic ties between those. It's great traditional engineering and chemistry can do a lot, but let's augment that with the new biotechnology capabilities and then also help the DoD to truly understand how that is going to occur over time. Next major point, a lot of the work in the DoD in this space is done by kind of DoD primes, right, the large kind of companies. And there's a lot of startups, like I shared, because that's where this technology comes from, that partner in some way, okay? And you know, DARPA and DOE are funding a lot of that, but we're in a stage now where that dynamic needs to grow and needs to change, and need to find new ways of kind of interacting, not only among the startups and the primes, but also the DoD, okay? A lot of the work that occurs in some of those kinds of efforts are funded by program offices, and more often than not, it's about bioproduction or scale-up manufacturing and biofuels and stuff like that. All of the topic or capability areas that I described earlier in this presentation, they don't always appear in a lot of the things that the DoD does. So again, what needs to occur? We need to continue to work, again, public-private partnerships to get those other capabilities into play and make sure that there's the appropriate interest and support around them so that they can be matured and gotten to a technical readiness level that is very, very relevant. Yes, there are BAAs that are out there. Again, for those of you that work in the more broader industrial base, those contracts are really small compared to like the large weapon systems that are being produced, right? Those systems could be hundreds of millions of dollars. You look at biotech, handful of millions here and there. I think for biotechnology to really scale at the way that not only the industry and the DoD want, there needs to be a significant investment so it has the best chance of being competitive. And yes, there's a lot of SBIR and STTR kinds of programs that are out there, but again, having been a government official and kind of worked in that space, those are often usually pretty small, mean, DARPA is being very creative these days that they're going direct to phase 2. They're helping to find ways of making those direct to phase 2 significantly larger. So yeah, there's some activity inside of the DoD complex, especially DARPA, to fix some of those things. But if we really do want to allow or help small businesses be competitive here, there's got to be a little bit of a change on how those programs are actually implemented. Right side of this, industry and infrastructure is also very much in a formative phase. And just to tie through a few very quick highlights, performance testing, so key performance indicators and metrics, this community needs more of those, okay? Those are the elements that will absolutely drive the DoD to go, oh, I see why this technology has an advantage over something else. Yes, it's led by small businesses and startups. There's a little bit of a market gap. I think the DoD should look at those metrics. The industry should absolutely live by those metrics in order to show the performance of biotechnology. Obviously, there's a workforce component of all of this. I described earlier a lot of biotechnology coming out of academia and people going into startups in Silicon Valley and places like that. A lot of those individuals don't know the DoD. They don't know the mission sets. They don't have any clue about national security. So building a workforce that truly understands biotechnology at its fundamentals, but also understands what does a customer need in the national security space, what are the operational missions, and how can biotechnology play a role in that? Driving those together and having people that really are at the forefront of the table of the conversation, that needs to happen. Obviously, the technological development also needs to occur. Right now, it's being funded a lot by the venture capital community. DoD needs to step up more. Air Force has been a big player in a lot of this, but again, there's a lot of other capabilities to be designed, and as others across the industrial complex, especially all of the services. And again, there are a lot of pockets across the services of people that are doing work. You know, I think the conversation here is leverage resources, bring together resources, build partnerships, build programs that integrate capabilities across the industrial complex in the services in order to deliver the most impactful capabilities that are going to change the game on all of this. Lastly, tech transition, a lot of biotechs at low technical readiness levels, and then as well as the scaling of it. A lot of times biotechnology is at proof of concept, minimally viable product in kind of commercial terms. Those need to be matured a lot more, and those demos need to be taken to a whole new level for them to really be relevant inside of the DoD. And that's work that we as an industry in conjunction, those public-private partnerships need to work on. Okay, all right. Who are in these spaces? So no market analysis is complete unless you talk about who are the key players. And I wanted to share with the audience here, there are a whole slew of people that have a vested interest in biotechnology. There's people working in renewable chemicals, people working in the environment, people working in cell-based food for military kind of rations and related technologies. There's materials, fabrics, fibers, multi-products. Again, a lot of people working there. And, you know, I was mentioning a handful of government organizations that were involved, but just to flesh that out a little bit more, there are a lot of branches of the DoD that are working in biotechnology and even beyond the DoD. Again, it's pockets of information. Creating synergy and partnerships amongst those groups, really important at this stage of development of biotechnology. And lastly, as you would expect, defense contracts, FFRDCs, and universities, they all play a role. There's a very deep ecosystem of people that have elements of biotechnology that are useful for integrated system-based capabilities for the DoD. One of the things that I've just really been focused on is bring those communities together, really show how those technologies can play a role in the operational mission. And to give you a flavor, and again, you know, I'm one person and one group in a larger community. I love to kind of share this slide. You know, over my handful of years at Battelle, these are all the people that I've had some kind of interaction with over 3 years or so. It really shows the breadth of people that are interested in biotechnology and interested in using biotechnology for national security application spaces. So the encouragement back to this community is there isn't a lack of interest and a lack of know-how. It really is, how do we bring the industry together and how do we show those technologies in meaningful ways for the DoD and the customers that will be using those technologies. Last thought for the presentation today before we go into the question and answer period is, I want to end on something really, really important. Biotechnology is an extremely powerful technology. It's up there with a lot of the other powerful technologies of the past. And with any powerful technology, those that are involved in this kind of work must be grounded in the ethical, legal, and social implications. It is of critical importance. I cannot stress this enough. And again, back to when I was a government official, it's something that I always tried to share with the community. I absolutely shared it with the team that we led, and leadership in the ethical, legal, social implications is just so important in this as applied to national security or biotechnology as applied to any other space. So to share with you just a few thoughts of how we should handle this. So first and foremost, I feel very strongly about technologists should handle technology and ethicists should handle the ethical, legal, and social implications. And those two communities should work very closely to make sure both perspectives stay true, okay? It's very important to be grounded and have clarity of thought as those things unfold. So that's why the first bullet here is collaboration. Government, industry, academia, ethicists, legal experts, all should come together, should communicate at every step along the way in order to understand the ethical, legal, social implications and regulatory kinds of challenges. In addition to those kinds of things, understanding failure, understanding successes, understanding where those kind of twists and turns might be, super important. And then the last part, and again, this speaks a little bit more to the tech transfer and the regulatory part, is it will always be the case that there are difficult to predict or kind of unexpected potential impacts of biotechnology. It's the nature of the technology. Biology wouldn't be what it is unless it had those twists and turns. That's what makes it unique and powerful. But understanding them, predicting where they might occur, and being able to manage it, active management of it, is critical to the success of all that. So the solutions for all this, again, pretty clear: increased collaboration, especially on the regulatory side and the potential hurdles. And the second part of that is sufficient protections in place in order to deal with the twists and turns that can come from it. I truly advocate that you just accept there will be twists and turns, but if you are prepared and you understand where those might come from, you'll be able to manage it. So active management of it is really an important aspect. So last aspect of ethical, legal, social implications. Again, I want to draw your attention to this I call ELS cubed I. The three S's are safety, security, and societal kind of implications and assessments. There are really three major dimensions of this that anybody working in biotechnology should be paying attention to. There's the biosecurity part of it. So more often than not, this technology is dual use. Again, it's a reality of the situation. Manage it, okay? Manage the dual use and understand the dual use. Second part of it, and this is less frequently spoken about, there is an attack surface when it comes to the exploitation of physical, cyber, human vulnerabilities that are associated with the production or use of biotechnologies. That's something I really think that we need to boost across the interagency moving forward into the future. Really important. Second part of it, biosafety. Obviously, powerful technology that can interface and interact with our bodies. So there's health and human safety related to that. But in addition to health and humans, there's also risks to the environments, unknown aspects of risks to the environments. And again, there's been a lot of technologies that I've seen that out there that, it's important to know about, but should they be released in the environment? Probably not, right? So, one needs to balance those kinds of elements at every step along the way. It takes very deep thought, introspection, information, and consulting with people in order to truly understand those elements of it. And then lastly, again, the broader aspects of the ethical, legal, social implications. These technologies, while we're talking about them in the national security context, society cares about them. And for a number of reasons, not only from the, should we be doing this even if we know how, but all the way to the, what is the economic prosperity that could come from some of these technologies? Or what's the regulatory compliance that would be associated with it, right? There's a whole slew of powerful technologies that might have started in the DoD domain, but made their way ultimately in the broader aspects of society, and we all have been beneficiaries for this. There will be multiple examples of that in the biotechnology space. Again, we are all stewards of making sure that that unfolds properly. The technologists and the ethical, legal, social implication experts must come together and truly work in a way to help to navigate and guide these very complex situations as time moves forward. All right, so with that, just like to conclude here and say thank you so much to NDIA for the opportunity to share these thoughts with you. Thank you so much to the industry. I have a lot of colleagues and friends and partners that are out there. It's been wonderful working with you, and I know you feel very passionately about all these spaces, and I look forward to a very bright future in this domain in bringing biotechnologies to a place where they can ultimately impact national security, but also society as a whole in terms of health or economic prosperity and whatever it may turn out to be. So thank you so much, and love to take any questions that you might have today.
Justin, thank you so much for a phenomenal presentation. Exactly what we hope for our one-on-one presentations. You touched on the science, you touched on the policy issues, security concerns. I really appreciate that. We do have some questions, and if it's okay, let me pose the first question from one of our participants. And that relates to some of the security issues that you addressed towards the end of your talk. So how do we reconcile academia's need to publish on biotechnology development versus the DoD's data sharing and security concerns, especially given how powerful this technology could be?
Yeah, this is a very complex situation, right? That and I think that there's a great happy medium that can be drawn in all of this. And the first part is in the academic realm, the foundational science and technology should be published on. And universities and academic institutions are going to continue to do that, and we should protect that. There are certain foundational elements that are important for all of that. As you start to go up the application chain and use these technologies for specific DoD kinds of missions, you start to get into areas where you might have controlled unclassified information. And there are a lot of new DoD programs that are coming out now, and even academic institutions that are becoming more familiar with those kinds of operations, in which you might want to protect some elements of that technology so it's not out in the broader kind of sense of things, still preserve your ability to publish and serve both of those. So again, that's one example of a step that could be used in a policy side of things to enable academics to still be very creative and thoughtful and publish, but allow a technology to make its way into applied spaces, still protect it so that we're not vulnerable. And again, if successful in those realms, there's other more higher protection channels that technology could be made there. I think it's thoughtful placement and policies that can enable both universes to coexist.
Excellent, excellent. We have another question that I put in the broad category of the valley of death question, which is, getting a great idea out of the laboratory, out of development, into the hands of the warfighter. And so the question reads, the examples of growable runways, newer technology sleeves are really cool, but how do you know how scalable these technologies can be in the field? And for example, do they need special knowledge or resources in the austere environment to grow the runways? Basically, how usable are these technologies in the field, and how do we bridge that gap?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, and everybody always, they bring up the valley of death. It exists, but let me not just focus on the valley itself. Let me focus a little bit of what I've learned over the years about how to traverse it. So, when I left government, I joined a large not-for-profit organization, applied science and technology organization, that has the ability to do that tech transition. I mean, one of the missions of Battelle is to do that applied science in a larger way. Here are some of the elements that allow an organization like that, and again, there's others out there that could do this too. It's understanding not only the value proposition, but also the key performance indicators and metrics of those technologies and how they play out when they're actually operationalized. More often than not, when I see a new biotechnology, I see a lot of discussion on the wonderful aspects of that technology, but not enough conversation about what's the market look like, what are the performance indicators, and how would somebody actually use and acquire this. As a community, if we do more of that and mature those technologies, asking those questions and building those minimal viable products and producing a way of having a sustainable revenue stream around it, it'll naturally push it through the valley of death. Okay, so there is a process, like there's a no kidding process for getting technologies through the valley of death. I truly think it's the right questions, the right organizations, the right resource and funding streams are needed in order to make that happen. And it's one of the first questions that I ask if I'm trying to like bring in a technology or something like that. Again, what does that market look like? What is the value proposition? How are you going to start to bring in some revenue to sustain it? And what are those performance metrics? And do they make sense for what you're trying to do? If you hit those elements, you can be on a pathway for getting it through the valley of death.
Very good. Here's another question on how do we bridge the gap in collaboration, recognizing that some of this biotechnology developed by private industry or academia can only be used by the DoD, meaning that industry cannot make money beyond this development with the DoD.
Yeah, so I like to, when it comes to biotechnology, this stems from the dual use aspect of it. I truly believe almost all biotechnologies can be used in a variety of ways. And when I say that, I mean, there are revenue streams that could be generated from it. So let me start with an infectious disease example, because I think this is the most clear. Let's say you're a biotech company developing a medical countermeasure for, I don't know, some kind of bio threat that a military person might experience. There's a very good probability that a variant of that technology could be used for cancer therapeutics, right? So if you can develop a cancer therapeutic in parallel with a technology that would be used for the DoD, then everybody is ultimately served, right? DoD mission is served. You don't get stuck in a DoD kind of application space where you can't sell it anywhere else. And then, you also help to maybe cure cancer along the way with it too, and create a technology that benefits society. The trick in all of that is making sure that the IP is managed appropriately, making sure that the technical teams that are working on that have the resources to work in both spaces in parallel. And then from like both a government and an industry perspective, I think that there needs to be an appreciation for the dual use nature of these technologies and promoting and facilitating those to occur so that we create economic prosperity in how those technologies are ultimately used, not only in the DoD, but also beyond.
Very good. We have a question that I love this question because I think it's a real personal question to you, Justin, which is, what are you most excited about for the future of biotechnology, and what biotechnology do you think is the next big thing?
Wow, that's a tough one. It's so hard because it's like kind of picking your favorite child. They're all your favorites. Let me just start with a couple, right? So I mean, you guys know I've done neurotechnology for many years. I still remain very optimistic about neurotechnology because of its broad-reaching impacts. Not only on the medical side of things, there are diseases that can be cured by neurotechnology that just are not solvable any other way. And then if you think about neurotechnology applied in other venues like lifestyle or the DoD or entertainment, things like that, I think neurotechnology has very broad-reaching elements. The second area that I think is really exciting is the programmable microbes for DoD purposes. So whether that's producing, these kind of biocements or repairing adaptable kinds of cements, or using biotechnology to produce high value materials, I think that the number and the breadth of applications of that technology are just huge. Okay, so I give you one human performance and kind of one medical, give you one like producing materials that I think are really important. If I had to pick a third in that space, I'm really excited about kind of the environmental impacts that we're all facing. And again, that could either be protecting the food supply, that could be buildings, climate change. There's a place for biotechnology in those kinds of spaces, and remediation of toxic chemicals, those kinds of things that are not viable via other kinds of approaches. So again, why are we so excited about these technologies? These three prime areas, they are in many ways existential threats to society and our national security, and biotechnology might be a way out of those areas if matured and developed and fostered appropriately.
Very good. Here's a question about relating to industry. So, of course, many of our listeners, many of our NDIA members are interested in what industry can do. And so, how can industry better understand and find other companies developing bioengineered materials? How can we get partnerships going between industrial players in this area?
Yeah, I found one of the greatest binders of people and organizations is putting out challenge problems that require communities to come together. I would love to see the DoD or even the government writ large put out more of these challenge kinds of scenarios that are not solvable by any individual organization alone, right? Again, if you look back in history, every major coming together of a community, even in industry, they are often driven by grand challenges that require the cooperation and coordination. Yeah, again, if the government officials are on the line, let's do that. Let's come up with top 3 challenges that are facing the DoD or national security enterprise right now. Make sure that those are sufficiently large and complex, and then ask the community to respond. This is another thing that I often hear now that I'm on the industry side as opposed to the government side. We're often up here saying, look, we're not hearing from the government to, for people to step up. And I think the more that can happen, I think the community is rearing and ready to respond. I mean, like charging at the gates, ready to deliver capabilities for the United States and to protect our country. So let's make those opportunities happen.
Yeah, very, very, very well put. And Justin, since we're almost at the end of the hour, if it's okay, I'll make that the almost last word. First, let me again thank you so much for your time and for the presentation. You hit on all the notes that we were hoping for, so tremendously appreciated. Let me also thank the audience for your attendance and the great questions you provided. Reminder: we will post the recording of this session on NDIA Connect as soon as possible. If you have feedback about this series of seminars, especially if you'd like to suggest topics that you'd like to see us cover, please email us at eti@ndia.org. Let me also offer a quick shameless promotion of some upcoming events. We're going to be doing another workshop on Microelectronics 101 on June 23rd. The next workshop in our Enabling the Joint Warfighter series, focusing on contested logistics, hosted by the Honorable Al Schaefer, will take place on July 14th. And then we'll be doing Blockchain 101 with Dr. Ian Taylor on July 21st. Registration information for all these will be available on the ETI website very soon. Again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for your participation. Justin, thank you so much for this, and thank you for all you've done for national security and continue to do in your various roles. Have a good rest of the day, everyone.
Thanks.